Quiet please, yes, quiet please, the podcast is about to start, so please take your seats and settle down, and please welcome onto the microphone, the offrailgamer. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and anyone else who might be listening. I am the offrailgamer, and this, at least as I understand it, is the 32nd episode of the fortnightly podcast series Off the Rails. I've been advised that it is not, contrary to plain old common sense, a podcast around steam locomotive rail transport, nor indeed roller coasters. Instead, I'm to speak to you on a subject related to video games. Yes, that's right. Off the Rails is a video games podcast, and aren't you glad I'm not carrying on the rest of the show like that, eh? Organauts, I just need to very quickly direct your attention to the podcast episode description. You know the drill by now, of course. YouTube, Twitch, X and TikTok. I've linked all my social platforms for you, along with my email address, offrailgamer@gmail.com, which is reserved for anyone who wants to write in with some lovely comments for listeners' whispers. And now that I've told you that, we can move swiftly on to what I've been playing recently, the part of the show in which I talk about what I've been playing recently. I've been back on the Atari, and have some games I'd like to talk about. First up is Smurf, which I added to my collection a little while ago, but I hadn't popped into my 2600 Plus console yet. It's a very basic game, which immediately put me in mind of Pitfall, although a simplified version. Now, it's fair to say that I've still not spent an overly long time with this game yet, so there could be more to it, but essentially the controls allow you to walk and to jump. And that doesn't sound very exciting, does it? But don't judge too harshly just yet. When I loaded up the cartridge, you see your Smurf. I couldn't tell you which Smurf it is, but they've no distinguishing features, so I can tell you who I know and think it's not. It's not Papa Smurf, it's not Smurfette. I'm pretty sure it's not Brainy, Hefty or Vanity, and I don't think it's Handy. Look, we could be here all day naming Smurfs that I don't think are the playable character in Atari video game, Smurf. But, 1, I don't know that it would make for particularly entertaining listening, and 2, it wouldn't tell you anything much about the game itself. I only have the game cartridge, but I googled the box that it came in back in the day, and there was no plot exposition or anything. Here are some of the game screens, it reads, and there are 4 images of the gameplay printed below, so we're not really missing anything is what I'm trying to tell you. Anyway, you start out as a regular Smurf, leaving your house in the Smurf village. You can't move to the left because your house is blocking the way, so we naturally infer that we must walk to the right, and doing so will lead you to the next game screen. Oh no, there's a fence blocking your path. And I have to confess that I got stuck on this hurdle a good deal longer than I ought to have. If you walk into the fence, you'll fall down and lose a life. Okay then, I thought to myself, I'll simply hop over the fence. Only in attempting this, I landed on the fence. I fell down and lost a life. After a bit of experimenting, I learned that your Smurf jumps further if you jump and then jump again. So the key to hopping over the fence, and I guess I should have said beware spoilers, but the game is about 42 years old, so it seems a little unnecessary at this point. The key to hopping over the fence, I found, is to walk up to it, jump straight up in the air, and then jump forward as soon as his little feet touched the ground. And with that, he cleared the fence, and I could proceed on to the next screen, which takes you inside a cave with a spider descending from the ceiling. The aim of the game is to progress through the different game screens and enter Gargamel's castle in order to rescue Smurfette. What I hadn't appreciated before I googled the game to inform my script is that your Smurf has a health bar that depletes over time, so if you take too long, you'll fall down and lose a life. All the while you're playing, an 8-bit version of the Smurfs theme song from the TV show plays, but I was so fixated on what I was doing This honestly didn't grate at all, though I can imagine parents in the 80s slowly losing their minds to it. Given how much time I've given to talking about Smurf, I'm sure you can appreciate I've genuinely been enjoying playing it. But it wasn't the only game I've been playing on the system. If you head over to my TikTok, you'll see I picked up Fatal Run for the Atari 7800. This is a new run of the game, and came beautifully boxed and with a manual. The box reads, "In this post-apocalyptic racing game, you must travel to various towns delivering medicine, while on your way to a missile base which houses a rocket that can save the world." In essence, it's a racing game, sure, but your car is equipped with plenty of James Bond-esque gadgets, including front-mounted machine guns, oil slicks, and smoke screens. At the end of each level, you reach the next town, and get a cutscene out the side window as you cruise through the neighbourhood to find out how many lives you saved, and how many civilians perished. You'll earn money for every life saved, and will then be taken to a shop where you can stock up on more ammo, buy upgrades and repairs for your vehicle, or simply refuel before hitting the open road again. The Atari 2-button controller is required, and whilst my Sega Master System controller does fit the port on the back of the console, it was a bit hit and miss on recognising my button prompts, so I brought myself the Atari controller, and guess what? I just about got to the top of the high score leaderboard and proudly typed in the initials ORG. Fatal Run is more than just a bog standard 8-bit racing game. As mentioned, it has a pretty wild plotline, but on top of this, each level is varied and will throw different road conditions at you. You could be driving on a clear sunny day, or at dusk, in the snow, or even in the fog. In the snow, your car will skid about more, and in the fog, you won't see oncoming obstacles until you're almost upon them. It's a super little game that poses the perfect challenge without causing you to rip the telly out of the wall and launch it out the window in frustration. I can tell you that I'm going to have lots more fun with this one. It's not all ancient games from decades past that I've been playing, although I have continued my playthrough of PS2's The Godfather from 2006, but hear this, I've actually picked up a new game, like actual current gen new. I think I know what you're going to say though when I tell you that my new pickup is Sonic Superstars and read the back of the box. Journey to the mystical North Star Islands in this all-new take on classic 2D Sonic high-speed action platforming. Play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles and Amy, and harness all-new Emerald powers to stop Dr. Eggman, Fang, and mysterious new adversary, Trip, from converting the island's giant animals into badniks before it's too late. And I know what you're thinking. So your new pickup is a 2D Sonic the Hedgehog game? Are you serious right now? Well, yes, I am serious. Look, it may be paying homage to the classic Sonic games, but in my opinion, Sonic's 2D games have always outclassed his 3D outings, and this is a new release, whether you like it or not. The only thing I have to say before I can move on, though, is that it's Dr. Robotnik, not Dr. Eggman, and I will die on that hill. Get yourself over to my YouTube, linked in the podcast episode description, and you'll find footage of my first moments with this game. Then you may judge for yourself whether it's a title you might in fact want to check out, or if it's one that maybe just isn't for you. I was still a fresh-faced baby boy when I grew up with 2D Sonic classics, so I'm thrilled we're still being offered new releases in this classic style. Right, Organauts, we're almost halfway through our allotted time, and the Nana's Knitting Circle has the room after us, so I guess we ought to crack on with the rest of the show. Hi offrailgamer, you didn't exactly capture my vocal likeness the other week, so maybe you could just read this in your normal voice this week. Until you mentioned it, I'd almost forgotten we'd been promised a new Fable game. It seems an absolute age since the last one, and I certainly hope the series isn't going to go the same way as Beyond Good and Evil, which I know you also covered in the last episode. Per your main segment last time, there's a couple of games that spring to mind that I don't feel ever got the hype they deserve. The first being Champions of Norath, and if I remember correctly, I'm sure you'll agree, as I think you sang its praises in an earlier podcast. The other game that I really enjoyed, but haven't seen many people talking about online, is Greedfall. It's a game that got some attention around its release date, but then seemed to all but disappear, and yet I personally loved it. It felt to me almost like Assassin's Creed meets Parallel Universe, if that makes any sense. Anyway, good job on losing the game again. Until next time, I'll be saying bye for now. Gemma. And at this rate, I think we all know who's got their eyes on being Organaut of the year 2024. Thank you again for writing into the show, Gemma from South Shields. Do you know what? I think you've given two perfect examples of underrated games there. I think I did talk about Champions of Norath way back, and it's certainly a game I would love to see more people talking about. And Greedfall too. I didn't get very far into it myself, but now that you've reminded me, I've been meaning to go back to it, because it was a very well crafted game, and the premise was really cool too. I'll have to dig it out and have another look at it. Now, if you're listening at home and wondering how you can get in touch, it's pretty simple really. Just send an email to offrailgamer@gmail.com. Keep it clean, don't be mean, and I just might read it out in Listener's Whispers next time. Oh no! After what we talked about last episode, you can imagine my reaction when I read the following headline. Get ready for some Assassin's Creed remakes, says Ubisoft CEO. Yes, they're working on yet more remakes instead of getting the sequel to Beyond Good and Evil released. And as I said last time, we've honestly had enough remakes at this point. How about getting some new games we can all be excited for? It's honestly starting to feel like the gaming market is really starting to stagnate. And with the prices studios are demanding for their games these days, it feels to me like they're really taking the mickey. I'm lucky I've hung on to all my old hardware and games, so I've a massive back catalogue to go back to and play. Because if the PS6 is as hard to come by as the current gen machines were, I really think I'm going to lose interest in modern collecting going forward. In this guy's opinion, the whole industry needs a massive shake-up. It feels like the passion's just gone out of it, and I hope it's a slump that will pass. What do you think, listeners? Has gaming become so dire, or am I just a miserable old git who's complaining too much? Let me know by writing in to offrailgamer@gmail.com. This week I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown of my 10 favourite consoles from 10 to 1 in my collection. I've tried to be completely honest with the order, even where I might place something higher if I was caught off guard, but I've based my rankings on several factors including time I've spent with the console, which games I get the most enjoyment from, available peripherals, and other things I'll not list here lest the episode become a methodology for how I rank things. Please note, the following is totally subjective and I could even alter the order at a future date. Feel free to let me know your top 10 console ranking in an email, and it could feature in the next Listener's Whispers. First up then, at number 10, is the Nintendo Wii. This is a system that I didn't even consider when it launched. I was still happy with my PS2 at the time. My sibling did get one though, and I had to concede how great Wii Sports was, and indeed still is. More recently though, I added the Wii to my collection and learned just how badly I'd underrated it. There are so many great games, some of my favourites including Harvest Moon Tree of Tranquility, My Sims Kingdom and Job Island. Hard-working people. I'll not go into the synopsis of these games here as we've a lot to get through, and I will almost certainly give the Wii an episode of its own in the future. I did wonder how I'd get on with the Wii motion controls, and it's fair to say they work better with some games than they do with others. But with the exemption of Ninja Bread Man, which I found very difficult to control, I've been getting on pretty well with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck so far. I also have the version of the Wii that's backwards compatible with the GameCube discs, which extends the library of playable games massively, a console that I once overlooked, but has claimed a spot on my top 10 gaming systems now, and I'd say deservedly so. It was certainly innovative with its motion controls for back in the day. Number 9 on my list is the Sega Mega Drive. I didn't have a Mega Drive growing up, but it earns its spot on my countdown for giving us the Road Rash trilogy of games alone, not to mention the Strike games, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Mutant League Hockey. At the end of the 80s and into the 90s, the big question was, are you Sega or Nintendo? Now here's the thing, many people claim that the SNES had better graphics, but with the exception of Donkey Kong Country, which I must admit was very impressive visually for the day, I couldn't disagree more. I genuinely think games on the Sega consoles looked a lot better than on the Nintendo. Since adding it to my collection, I've spent a fair amount of time with the Mega Drive, and I've been introduced to some excellent games. I certainly couldn't leave it out of my top 10. The Xbox 360 has made it to the number 8 spot on my favourite consoles, and this machine has a lot to answer for. My PS2 died in 2008, and I didn't really do much gaming for the next 3 years. It was in the second half of 2011 that I finally bought a 360 and reignited my passion for the hobby. This generation was a bit of a golden age of gaming, with Rockstar giving us both Red Dead Redemption and GTA 5. We were also treated to the first Batman Arkham games, and there were some phenomenal indie titles that got released on the platform too. This was the first console that I played Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons on, and you know how much I love that game. Additionally, I spent a lot of time playing Fable 3, and it was the medium that introduced me to Carcassonne, which is now one of my favourite tabletop games. At the time, we Xbox 360 owners lost out to PS3 technologically speaking, as the Sony device was capable of playing Blu-rays, where we only had the ability to play DVDs. But honestly, I still tend to get DVDs over Blu-rays as a result of price, and this is a game system rather than a home theatre, so it wasn't really a major deal for me. I don't have a huge amount else to say about this entry, but I can't deny the number of hours I spent with it. Needless to say, I think it's time we talk about entry number 7. And it has to be my Atari 2600 Plus. You can tell how badly I've fallen for this system given the amount I talk about it, and the fact I dedicated a whole month to it over on YouTube, a season that I'm fully intending to bring back next year, by the way. The console plays both 2600 and 7800 cartridges, giving modern gamers access to some amazing video game history. The games aren't going to take 60 plus hours to complete, and many of them will kick your butt in 10 minutes or less, but they're successful in making you want to have one more go to see if you can improve your score. The other neat thing is that people are still making new games in the form of homebrews, and there's a site called Atari Age that puts these onto cartridges, so you can still grow your collection for the console. I'd mistakenly believed the classic joystick was the only controller for the Atari, but how wrong I was, as I learned when I needed the dial controls to play games like Night Driver, or even Kaboom. And then I recently picked up a 7800 game, Fatal Run, which requires the Atari 2-button controller. The variety of games is huge, and I've become a very enthusiastic supporter of this classic system. But the Atari was beaten to the number 6 spot on my list by the first console I ever played, the Sega Master System, or Master System 2 if you want to get technical, but they were the same generation and played the same cartridges. I was playing the Master System from the tender young age of 3 or 4, so it definitely holds the most nostalgia for me. I've literally spent my entire life with it, and as such, it's the Master System versions of the Sonic the Hedgehog games that I always think of first. We also got Alex Kidd in Miracle World, which has seen a massive resurgence in recent years, with gamers finally acknowledging how awesome it is. But there are so many Master System games that are all really good fun, and yet seem largely forgotten to time. I'm talking Rainbow Islands, Rampart, Shinobi, Teddy Boy, Rampage, and many others. For an 8-bit console, I still think many of the games still look really nice, and this was really the generation, along with the NES, that I feel games started to develop into what we know today. We're getting into my top 5 consoles now, and for me it has to be the Sony PlayStation, or PS1 for clarity. This was the console that introduced us to Lara Croft, Crash Bandicoot, and Spyro the Dragon. It gave us the original GTA trilogy, Driver, and Driver 2, And then there's the PlayStation startup noise, which still makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up every time I hear it. The general layout of the DualShock or DualSense controllers haven't really changed in all that time either, because Sony just got it right with their first ever console design. As a kid, I sank so many hours into games like Trick and Snowboarder and WWF SmackDown wrestling games. The PS1 was really the console that first cemented me as a gamer. But better still is the PS2. This system moved GTA into 3D and effectively turned the series into what we know today. It also brought us more grown-up titles like Max Payne, while still delivering classic platformers in games like Ratchet & Clank or Jak and Daxter. Given the amount of time I spent playing Star Wars Battlefront, The Godfather, GTA San Andreas, and even FIFA 08, the PS2 had to place 4th on my top 10 list of consoles. Plus, it was the first generation of consoles capable of playing DVDs all the way back in the very early 2000s. Crikey, we're really coming down to the wire time-wise now, and I've still got my top 3 to talk about. So let's talk Nintendo Switch, shall we? I was one of the many people who picked up the Switch during lockdown, with Animal Crossing New Horizons being the deciding factor for me, and the potential to be able to visit friends on their virtual islands. Nintendo has a fantastic library of exclusive games, and the Switch is a hugely innovative bit of kit, docking to the TV as a home console, or for taking on the go as a handheld. It's not the most powerful console, but I had zero issues playing The Witcher 3 on it, and I've certainly spent a lot of time with it over the years now. It had to take my number 3 spot, at least because of what it's capable of doing. That, and Ring Fit, did keep me moving when we weren't allowed to leave our homes. My number 2 on this list goes to the Xbox One. There were so many simply fantastic games released during this generation, and Xbox was my machine of choice. We did miss out on some great PlayStation exclusives, I'm thinking Spider-Man in particular, but I shared so many great moments with my trusty Xbox. After all, this was the generation that gave us Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla, The Witcher 3, and of course my favourite game ever released to date, Red Dead Redemption 2. It was also on Xbox One that I added Oxenfree to my library through Game Pass. I had it installed for months before I got round to finally playing it, but in just a few hours I'd been totally blown away. Graphics took a massive leap forward between the 360 and Xbox One generations, but more than that, I just have so many great memories from the last generation, which went hand in hand with the Switch in helping to keep me sane through lockdown. So what takes my top spot then? Well, I have to say that in my opinion the PS5 definitely comes out on top out of the current generation consoles. PS Plus definitely rivals Xbox Game Pass, and in fact delivers the better service in my opinion. PlayStation continues to offer the better exclusives, although I am looking forward to playing Indiana Jones on Xbox, and PSVR 2 is so easy to plug in and play now, you can be transported to new worlds in no time. And some of the VR experiences are breathtaking. I can't describe the feeling when I jumped into No Man's Sky in VR for the first time earlier this year. I couldn't personally put any console above the PS5. It is a true masterpiece. But do you agree? What console can't you praise highly enough? Why not email offrailgamer@gmail.com and let me know. Otherwise, that's another episode in the can. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time on Spotify, Amazon Music and YouTube. I think Google Podcasts is a thing of the past now. Anyway, until next time, bye!